The green hills of Ireland are famous for their patron saint, a figure whose legends are woven into the very fabric of the island. But what if the man we celebrate every March 17th wasn't Irish at all? What if I told you that St. Patrick was actually a kidnapped Roman citizen, a slave snatched from the fading twilight of Roman Britain? To find the truth, we must step back to the fading twilight of Roman Britain. The sea mist is heavy, rolling in off the rugged, crumbling coastlines. The dark waters hold untold dangers. Before we set sail into this ancient, forgotten world to uncover the story behind the myth, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to our journey. And please, let me know in the comments below, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what time is it for you? Settle in, get comfortable, and let the whispers of the past surround you. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you unwind and gently fall asleep. We begin our journey, not in the emerald fields of Ireland, but amidst the sprawling stone villas of a dying empire. We will explore the true origins of a legendary figure of life far more harrowing than the comforting myths suggest. The year is somewhere around 385 AD. We find ourselves in a world on the brink of profound, unstoppable change. The mighty Roman legions are actively withdrawing from the province of Britannia, sailing away to protect the crumbling heart of their massive empire. They leave behind a deeply vulnerable and highly fragile society. It's a world where native Celtic traditions blend uneasily with fading Roman infrastructure. The protective walls are crumbling. The coasts are increasingly exposed to those who watch from across the dark waters. But inside the thick stone walls of a wealthy estate, there is a lingering, false sense of security. The chilling, salty coastal breeze sweeps through the wide open courtyards. It carries a subtle, warning hint of the wild sea beyond the manicured gardens. Yet inside, all feels perfectly safe and entirely permanent. The distant, rhythmic sound of rain beats gently against the heavy red clay tiles of the vast estate roof. It is a comforting sound to those inside. It is here we first meet a privileged young boy named Patricius. It is a proud Latin name. It clearly denotes his high, noble status in this fading twilight era. He lives with his family in a place they call Baena Venta Bernia. Its exact location remains a deep historical mystery to this very day. Most scholars believe it sat somewhere along the rugged, windswept western coast of Britain. It was a place where the edges of the civilized Roman world simply faded into the vast, gray ocean. Patricius grows up caught between two very different worlds. He speaks a rhythmic British Celtic language with the local people. He also speaks the formal, structured Latin of his proud Roman heritage. He is a child of immense, undeniable privilege. He grows up on a wealthy Roman villa, surrounded by sprawling lands. The massive estate is dimly lit by flickering oil lamps. It is filled with loyal servants and relative, quiet luxury. You can easily smell the lingering, comforting scent of wood smoke and damp stone in the long, quiet corridors. The soft, pleasant texture of finely woven, imported linen tunics brushes softly against his skin. This is the only life he knows, a life of quiet comfort, a life deeply sheltered from the encroaching, terrifying darkness of the outside world. His father, Calpurnius, is a highly respected decurion. He is a powerful Roman civic official responsible for collecting taxes and maintaining local order. You can almost hear the faint, metallic clinking of heavy Roman coins. They are being carefully and methodically counted on a heavy, polished wooden table in his father's private study. His grandfather, Potitus, is a dedicated Christian priest. This clearly shows a long-standing, deep family tie to the powerful, growing church. It is a proud lineage of both faith and civic authority. And yet, the young Patricius is completely different from the men who came before him. Despite his family's prestigious religious titles, the young boy is a self-proclaimed atheist. He cares very little for the quiet teachings of the church. He ignores the gentle prayers of his grandfather. He completely dismisses the deep faith that anchors his family. He is comfortable. He is highly complacent. He truly believes his warm world of safe hearths and heavy silver coins will simply last forever. But this was only a beautiful, fleeting illusion. The fragile peace of his youth is about to be shattered completely. The Roman world he knows so well is slowly, quietly crumbling all around him. For centuries, the mighty empire had provided ultimate safety, paved roads, and a grand sense of universal order. Now, the emperors in distant lands desperately need their soldiers closer to Rome. The great, invincible military machine is quietly packing up its shining weapons and sailing away. The tall watchtowers along the rocky coast now stand completely empty and perfectly quiet. Patricius does not fully grasp the profound danger of this silence. He is just a carefree boy. He rides his fast horses over the rolling green coastal hills. He plays endlessly in the vast, perfectly manicured gardens of his beautiful home. The people of his town try desperately to carry on exactly as before. They hold their busy markets. They trade their crafted goods. They try hard to ignore the growing, terrifying shadows on the horizon. But the sea is vast, and the sea is very cold. It hides many dark, violent secrets beneath its rolling waves. And across that sea, fierce, hungry men are preparing their long skin boats. They know the Roman soldiers are leaving. They know the coastal villas are fat with gold and completely unguarded. Patricius sleeps soundly and deeply in his warm, soft bed. He is entirely unaware of the absolute nightmare sailing quietly toward his sleeping shores. He is exactly 16 years old when his perfect world violently ends. It happens quickly in the quiet, gray, misty hours of the coastal dawn. The sudden, terrifying roar of strange, guttural war cries shatters the peaceful morning silence. The fierce raiders have arrived. They are known to the terrified Romans as the Scoti. They are fierce, ruthless, and terrifying pirates from across the treacherous Irish Sea. They strike the coast with terrifying speed and absolute brutal efficiency. They deliberately target wealthy villas and completely undefended settlements. They know the retreating Roman military has left these rich prizes perfectly vulnerable. The attack is specifically characterized by rapid, brutal, overwhelming violence. It is designed to crush local defenses before any town militia can possibly form. The sharp, acrid smell of burning thatch and ancient timber quickly fills the morning air. The beautiful, sprawling villa is intentionally set ablaze. Everything the young Patricius knows is rapidly going up in hot, crackling flames. His home, his safety, his entire patrician life. The sudden destruction of his family estate marks the absolute final end of his privileged youth. In the brutal 5th century, human trafficking is a massive, terrible economic driver. Slaves serve as a primary, highly valued currency in the ancient, ruthless world. The raiders are not just looking for heavy silver and shining gold. They are hunting for living people. Patricius is violently captured. He is dragged away from his burning, collapsing home. He is thrust headfirst into an absolute, waking nightmare. Thousands of other terrified Roman Britons are captured alongside him during these widespread, devastating coastal raids. This period of intense, violent raiding is no mere accident of history. It directly coincides with the powerful reign of a legendary Irish High King. His name is Niall of the Nine Hostages. His immense power reaches far across the dark, cold waters. Under his looming shadow, the fierce pirates operate with total, terrifying impunity. The weeping captives are bound tightly together in long, miserable, stumbling lines. They are quickly fitted with heavy, chafing leather yokes or cruel, biting iron collars. They are prepared for the long, agonizing march to the waiting ships. The rough, agonizing bite, of course. Rope is tied incredibly tightly around the wrists of the captives. It bites deeply into their soft, untested skin. Patricius feels the heavy, suffocating, crushing feeling of dread and profound confusion among his captured people. They are herded roughly like frightened animals toward the dark, waiting boats. The chaotic splashing of freezing cold mud and salty seawater completely surrounds them. They are forced brutally onto the desolate, freezing, windswept beach. Many unfortunate captives do not survive the brutal initial march to the coast. The elderly, the sick, and the weak are simply left behind. Others perish quickly from the sheer, overwhelming shock of the sudden violence. Patricius is young and very strong, but he is completely terrified. He looks back one last time through the thick, gray mist. He sees the thick, black, oily smoke rising high from his beautiful childhood home. The comfortable life of a wealthy Roman citizen is truly gone forever. He is now simply cargo. He is entirely property. He is a helpless slave, bound for an unknown, terrifying destination. But this terrifying morning was only the very beginning of his long torment. The solid, familiar land is now behind him, but the true terror lies just ahead. The shouting raiders push him forward without mercy. He steps deep into the freezing, dark water. The boats are waiting patiently in the rolling surf. They are strange, primitive, terrifying vessels bobbing wildly in the morning tide. Patricius is forced violently aboard. He huddles in the dark. He has absolutely no idea if he will ever see the green shores of his beloved homeland again. The dark body of water they must now cross is vast and completely unforgiving. It is known to the educated Romans as Oceanus Hibernicus. We know it today simply as the Irish Sea. The fierce raiders utilize traditional, ancient Celtic boats called curraghs. These are not the massive, sturdy, heavy wooden galleys of the grand Roman navy. They are small, flexible, terrifyingly light vessels. They are made of thick animal skins, stretched incredibly tightly over a light wooden frame. To a wealthy boy used to solid stone floors, the boat feels terrifyingly, impossibly fragile. The maritime journey quickly becomes a dizzying descent into absolute madness. The deafening, rhythmic crash of freezing, dark, heavy waves beats relentlessly against the stretched hide hull of the curragh. The nauseating, dizzying pitch and roll of the small vessel is entirely constant. They are caught completely helplessly in a vast, uncaring, violent ocean. The miserable captives are likely kept in the dark, cramped, foul-smelling holes. Or worse, they are left tied and completely exposed to the freezing, biting elements on the open decks. The bitter, sharp taste of ocean salt is permanently caked on the cracking lips and pale skin of the violently shivering captives. Every single breath is a terrible struggle against the freezing, stinging ocean spray. You can clearly hear the loud groaning, straining, terrifying sounds of the wooden boat frame. It flexes and bends constantly under the immense, crushing, heavy weight of the violent sea. It truly sounds as if it will completely break apart at any given moment. The terrifying, endless, vast expanse of gray, foaming water stretches out in every single direction under a heavy, dark, overcast sky. Navigation in these treacherous waters is highly, incredibly perilous. The pagan raiders have no modern compasses or maps. They rely entirely on fading coastal landmarks, the faint, hidden stars, and their deep, ancient, inherited knowledge of the pulling tides. Celtic maritime technology is entirely different from Roman engineering, but it is highly, incredibly adapted to these violent, towering Atlantic swells. The small skin boats ride the massive rolling waves like buoyant corks. Still, the terrifying journey from Britain to Ireland can easily take several agonizing, terrifying days. It all depends entirely on the unpredictable, violent, swirling coastal weather. Severe seasickness, terrible dehydration, and extreme, freezing exposure claim the quiet lives of many suffering captives during this long crossing. Patricius watched others struggling greatly during the rough voyage, feeling a deep sense of loneliness as he left the safe, civilized Roman world behind. He was heading directly for an unmapped, unknown island, a faraway land filled with wild tales and ancient legends in the minds of the civilized Romans. This cold crossing meant a complete, lasting farewell to everything he cherished. It is a complete, total, cultural severance from the entire Roman Empire. The hidden route they take carefully bypasses the heavily fortified, dangerous ports. The experienced pirates intentionally seek out hidden, rocky, isolated inlets on the jagged, wild Irish coast. They want to slip quietly into the dark land, completely unnoticed. For days, the young Patricius simply endures the freezing, biting cold. He endures the terrifying, deafening sounds of the crashing sea. He endures the sharp, gnawing hunger deep in his empty stomach. He is a boy who has been completely broken by a cruel world. In fact, he has never felt so completely, utterly alone in his entire life. The proud atheist boy who once ignored his grandfather's gentle prayers now finds himself crying in the dark. He is quietly pleading for a miracle. He begs the empty heavens for the violent storm to stop. He begs for the sickening rocking to finally cease. But the dark sea simply roars back at him. It offers absolutely no comfort. It offers only cold, wet, unending misery. Finally, after days of terror, the violent tossing of the sea begins to change. The dark water grows slightly calmer. The heavy wind begins to die down. The shadow of a massive, dark, looming landmass appears slowly through the heavy, gray coastal fog. The small, battered skin boats finally scrape heavily against the rocky, unfamiliar, jagged shores of ancient Ireland. Patrick has landed in a completely mystical, terrifying new land. His boat likely lands in the far northern territories of the island. This is the ancient, powerful realm of the Dal Riada, or the fierce Ulada. It is a deeply wild place of deep magic. ancient warrior kings, and fierce, proud clans. Upon landing on the wet stones, there is absolutely no rest for the weary. The freezing, terrified captives are immediately and ruthlessly assessed, traded, or sold. They are presented like mere cattle to local pagan kings and wealthy, powerful chieftains. According to ancient, enduring tradition, Patrick is quickly sold to a local chieftain named Myliok. He is immediately assigned the absolute lowest, most degrading rung of the social ladder. He is made a simple slave. His only task is herding dumb sheep and dirty pigs on the freezing, lonely, wind-blasted hillsides. His new, terrible home is completely in the dark, looming shadow of Mount Slimish. This massive, lonely peak is located in what is now modern-day County Antrim. It is a place of wild, untamed, breathtaking beauty. But to the young, captured Patrick, it is nothing but a freezing, inescapable prison. The rough landscape is drastically, shockingly different from his comfortable home in Britain. There are no straight, paved Roman roads here. There are no warm, comfortable brick villas to offer shelter. This wild land is heavily, densely forested. It is completely dominated by deep, dangerous, sucking bogs and rugged, impassable, dark mountains. The wet squelch of freezing black peat mud is entirely constant under his bare, bleeding feet. He is marched violently inland, completely away from the sea. He shivers uncontrollably in the freezing air. The heavy, damp, suffocating weight of a rough, poorly tanned animal skin is suddenly given to him for warmth. It smells terrible and does very little against the biting, howling wind. He is immediately plunged and immersed in a purely ancient pagan culture. It is completely, utterly alien to his quiet, Roman, and peaceful Christian upbringing. He constantly hears the harsh, guttural, sharp sounds of an unfamiliar, ancient language echoing in the damp, heavy air. The young patricius is violently forced to quickly learn this complex Old Irish just to survive. He must quickly understand his cruel captors' harsh commands or face immediate, severe, painful punishment. He has completely lost his proud, noble name. He has lost his high, respected status. He has lost his entire freedom in a matter of a few terrifying days. The 5th century Irish climate is incredibly harsh and unforgiving. It is significantly colder and much wetter than the green Ireland we know today. Outdoor survival is a grueling, daily, painful test of human endurance. He is soon sent up into the lonely mountains entirely by himself. The impenetrable, swirling, thick white fog clings tightly to the jagged, rocky slopes of Mount Slimish. It completely hides the world below. He is entirely cut off from all of humanity. He spends endless, quiet days and freezing, terrifying nights simply wandering the lonely hills. The piercing, lonely, echoing cry of a distant hawk constantly circles over the vast, empty, quiet wilderness. That single cry is his only living companion. The wealthy boy who once wore fine, soft linen now wears dirty, muddy skins. The arrogant boy who once completely rejected God now finds himself constantly staring up at the vast, gray, empty sky. He is desperately searching for any small sign of hope. He is a humble shepherd now. He is just a slave in a lost land of deep mist and dark shadows. As we finally leave young Patrick on these strange, mist-shrouded shores to face the harsh wilderness alone, I am very curious. What other deep historical mysteries, ancient forgotten legends, or epic, terrifying journeys would you like us to deeply explore next? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But for now, let us quietly follow him up into the wild, sleeping mountains. Patrick was now a helpless captive. His brutal captivity lasted for 6 continuous, agonizing years in the wild, unforgiving Irish wilderness. It was an endless, grinding cycle of daily survival. The primary duty of a lowly slave shepherd was keeping the fragile flocks completely safe. He had to protect the wandering sheep and rooting pigs from the dense, hungry populations of native Irish wolves. These were massive, terrifying, apex predators that freely roamed the dark, ancient woods. His daily diet would have been incredibly meager and deeply unsatisfying. It consisted mostly of whatever simple, wild forage he could find on the rocky slopes. He ate dry, unflavored oats and bitter, tough roots. He rarely ever tasted any warm meat. He lived completely outdoors all year round. He severely lacked any proper, warm shelter even during the harsh, freezing, deadly winters. Mount Slemish was a massive, extinct volcanic plug rising sharply from the earth. Its incredibly steep, jagged, rocky terrain made the daily herding physically demanding and incredibly dangerous. One wrong step on the slick rocks could easily mean a broken bone. A broken bone meant certain, agonizing death for a lonely, forgotten slave. The profound isolation he felt was nearly absolute and totally crushing. Long, quiet, terrible weeks could easily pass without any meaningful human interaction. The ancient, twisted Irish forests completely surrounding the lonely mountain were dense and incredibly dark. They were widely considered deeply dangerous and completely full of ancient, angry pagan spirits. The constant, unending exposure to the harsh, unforgiving elements caused immense, daily physical suffering. He suffered constantly from painful, stinging frostbite on his pale toes and raw fingers. He suffered deeply from severe, gnawing malnutrition that weakened his growing bones. Slaves had absolutely no legal rights under the strict, ancient Brehon law system. Their fragile lives were entirely at their cruel master's unpredictable whim. They could be beaten or killed for the smallest, most innocent mistake. Despite the terrible, crushing hardship, this dark period forced Patrick to learn rapidly. He intimately learned every hidden crease of the wild Irish landscape. He learned to read the unpredictable, violent weather and crucial, desperate survival tactics. You can almost feel the biting, razor-sharp wind howling relentlessly. It sweeps violently across the exposed, rocky face of the silent mountain. You can easily imagine the coarse, greasy, heavy feel of unprocessed sheep's wool. It slips constantly under his cold, totally numb fingers as he works. The low, haunting, terrifying howl of a hungry wolf pack constantly echoed from the dark tree line at dusk. It always brought a deep, primal, freezing fear to his young heart. The dull, persistent, agonizing ache of hunger in his stomach was always there. It was his only companion during the long, frozen, endless winter nights. The crisp, loud crunch of early morning frost constantly covered the pale, yellowed heather of the deep, sinking bog. Every single day was exactly like the terrible day before it. It was a bleak life of pure, unbroken, lonely misery. He was completely stripped of all basic worldly comforts. He had absolutely no human companionship to ease his deeply troubled mind. The sheer, overwhelming, quiet emptiness of the lonely mountain forced Patrick to look deeply inward. The heavy silence was completely deafening. It was a profound silence that slowly, quietly, began to change him from the inside out. He truly had nothing left in the world but his own quiet, swirling thoughts. The once pampered, arrogant Roman boy was slowly, painfully dying on that hill. In his place, a hardened, incredibly resilient survivor was being forged in the freezing, endless rain. The rapidly changing seasons only brought completely new, terrible torments. Spring brought freezing, driving rains that soaked him instantly to the very bone. Summer brought thick swarms of biting, relentless insects that plagued him and his restless flock. Autumn brought the terrifying dying of the light and the swift return of the bitter, biting cold. Winter was a white, blinding, silent nightmare of deep, heavy snow and howling, violent gales. Yet, he had to learn the secret, hidden paths of the steep mountain. He learned exactly where the small, clean, fresh springs bubbled secretly from the dark, cracked rocks. He learned exactly which wild, colorful berries were safe to eat and which would make him violently ill. He learned to carefully read the gray, moving clouds to predict the sudden, violent storms. He watched them sweeping in, fast, from the unseen, distant ocean. He truly became a wild creature of the dense, dark woods. His cruel master rarely ever visited him on the high slopes. When he did, it was only to greedily count the living sheep and fat pigs. He offered absolutely no kind, comforting words to the shivering boy. He offered no extra warm food to ease his immense suffering. He simply made completely sure his valuable breathing property was still alive and working. Patrick was entirely, profoundly alone in a massive, uncaring world. But in this crushing, absolute, terrifying isolation, a profound, beautiful internal shift was quietly beginning to take place. The terrible, heavy silence of the mountain was actively preparing him for something much greater. In the deep, dark depths of his isolation and daily suffering, Patrick experienced a profound spiritual awakening. He slowly, desperately turned to the gentle faith he had once completely ignored. He desperately needed it just to survive the severe daily psychological torment of his terrible captivity. In his later famous writings, he openly admits he was functionally an arrogant atheist before his sudden captivity. He truly credits the extreme, daily hardship of his brutal slavery as the sudden, powerful catalyst for his deep spiritual conversion. He wrote that he would pray up to 100 times in the single daylight hours. He prayed nearly as many times in the dark, freezing, terrifying night. This incredibly long period truly represents a classic, profound desert experience. He was finding pure, shining enlightenment through extreme, painful, constant deprivation. He would purposefully wake long before the gray, cold dawn. He woke in deep snow, thick frost, or pouring, freezing rain, just to begin his daily whispered prayers. The incredible psychological resilience he rapidly developed prevented him from succumbing to dark despair or utter screaming madness. His intense, burning, daily devotion completely transformed his internal mental landscape. It gave him a profound sense of deep, unshakable inner peace, despite his external, physical torment. The wild, natural, terrifying world around him was once a source of absolute, freezing terror. Now, it slowly, miraculously, began to feel like a massive, quiet, beautiful cathedral. The tall, ancient, swaying trees were the strong, living pillars. The vast, gray, open sky was the grand vaulted ceiling of his personal church. He began to experience incredibly vivid, powerful dreams and bright internal visions. He interpreted these strange, moving visions as divine, comforting messages from a higher power. This unwavering, deeply personal, burning faith became the defining characteristic of his entire life. It became the bedrock of his future, legendary mission to the very people who enslaved him. The quiet, rhythmic, soothing murmuring of his Latin prayers was constantly whispered into the vast, empty stillness. His solitary voice floated across the cold, majestic mountain. The comforting, warm, orange glow of a tiny, carefully guarded peat fire was his only light. It flickered weakly in the dead of the freezing, terrifying night. The sudden sensation of cold, driving rain on his pale face was no longer felt as a cruel punishment. It was now deeply felt as a gentle, holy, cleansing force. The brilliant, blinding, golden light of the morning sun frequently broke over the eastern ridge. It always arrived right after a long, freezing night of constant, whispered prayer. It filled his tired body with immense, glowing, beautiful hope. The deep, heavy, absolute silence of the wilderness allows a solitary voice to feel immense and truly powerful. In fact, his quiet prayers became his absolute, literal lifeline. They were the only thing keeping him firmly tethered to his fading humanity. When the hungry wolves howled fiercely in the dark, he simply prayed much louder. When the heavy snow completely buried his small, pathetic shelter, he closed his eyes and found immense warmth. He found true, lasting heat in his deep, burning faith. The pampered, wealthy boy who once mocked his grandfather's ancient religion was entirely, completely gone. He was fully replaced by a deeply spiritual, highly disciplined, totally focused young man. He had miraculously found a powerful, internal strength that no cruel, earthly master could ever take away from him. He had truly found an unyielding, bright hope that no freezing, brutal winter could ever completely extinguish. This intense, burning, profound inner transformation would eventually manifest into a clear, driving, unstoppable purpose. The heavy, endless silence of the quiet mountain was about to be finally broken. Patrick's endless, grueling, daily routine was suddenly, violently shattered by a powerful, highly prophetic dream. This shocking vision told him clearly that his long time of miserable, painful slavery was finally over. It prompted him to urgently plan a highly dangerous, terrifying, almost impossible escape. He recorded hearing a mysterious, gentle, incredibly clear voice in his deep sleep. The voice clearly told him he did well to fast and would very soon depart for his beloved home country. This simple, impossible message filled his tired heart with wild, uncontrollable, burning hope. A short, quiet time later, a second, equally powerful, shocking vision came to him in the dark night. The exact same mysterious voice informed him that his waiting ship was finally ready. He intuitively, deeply, immediately understood that this vital, saving ship was not anywhere nearby. He knew in his very bones it lay roughly 200 miles away on the distant, unknown, dangerous coast. Fleeing harsh slavery was a severe, unforgivable capital offense in the ancient, bloody Celtic world. If he was caught by any armed hunting party, the strict, terrifying punishment was truly absolute. It meant hours of brutal, unspeakable torture or immediate, violent, bloody death. He had to completely abandon his highly valuable, totally vulnerable flock of sheep and pigs. This was a massive, terrible, immense risk that would immediately alert his cruel master to his sudden, shocking absence. He had no carefully drawn map to safely guide his fleeing feet. He had no brass, magnetic compass to accurately point the difficult way south. He had absolutely no stored, hidden provisions for a long, grueling, starving journey across completely uncharted territory. The immense, terrifying distance required him to secretly cross vast, dangerous stretches of rival tribal lands. He had to pass right through the heart of highly dangerous, completely warring, ancient kingdoms. Navigating the treacherous 5th century Irish landscape meant totally avoiding the few established, muddy tracks. If he walked on the open roads, he could be easily spotted and quickly captured by roaming, violent warriors. He had to rely entirely on his 6 long years of harsh wilderness survival skills. He had to move completely undetected through the deep bogs and dark woods. His deep, newfound, burning faith provided an absolute, unwavering, complete conviction that he would not be captured by his angry enemies. You can easily imagine the sudden, heart-pounding, terrifying realization upon waking in the freezing, silent dark. He knew the powerful, vivid dream was a literal, undeniable command to finally move. He took silent, incredibly careful, slow footsteps backward away from the camp. He moved slowly away from the sleeping, unaware flock under the protective cover of utter pitch darkness. The pale, silver, glowing moonlight softly illuminated the treacherous, wildly uneven ground of the high, dangerous bogs. He could clearly hear the rushing, freezing cold water of small, hidden mountain streams. He crossed them incredibly carefully in the dead of night to completely hide his scent from the fierce tracking hounds. The heavy, damp, thick mist rising slowly from the low, green valleys acted as a natural, protecting cloak. It completely hid the desperate, terrified fugitive from any watchful, cruel eyes. But this was only the very first, terrifying step of a massive journey. He had to carefully descend the massive, rocky, steep slopes of Mount Slimish without making a single sound. A snapped, dry twig or a loudly rolling stone could easily wake the fierce, sleeping mountain wolves. It could quickly alert the nearby, sleeping, armed guards of his cruel master. He moved exactly like a silent, invisible ghost through the dense, dark, wet heather. He used the bright, distant, twinkling stars as his only reliable guide through the confusing, twisting, dark valleys. He was finally leaving the only brutal world he had known for 6 long, agonizing years. He was bravely stepping into the vast, terrifying, completely unknown wild. He had no warm food in his shrinking belly and absolutely no iron weapon in his shaking hand. He was armed entirely and only with a burning, unshakable belief that he was being gently guided homeward. He completely descended the quiet mountain and boldly began a desperate, terrifying flight across the wild, beating heart of ancient Ireland. The grueling, incredibly stealthy, starving journey covered 200 treacherous miles across the deep bogs and dark forests. It eventually, miraculously ended at the distant, roaring coast where he magically secured passage on a rough, pagan ship. The incredibly long, painful trek likely took him all the way from County Antrim in the far, freezing north. It led him completely down to a busy, muddy port in the distant, warmer southeast. Historians firmly believe he may have finally reached the coastal areas we now know as Wexford or Wicklow. He had to carefully, silently navigate massive, impossible, terrifying physical barriers along the rough way. These likely included the wide, deep, rushing waters of the mighty River Shannon. He also had to push through incredibly dense, totally impassable, dark, ancient woodlands. He moved almost entirely at night, trusting the pale moon to guide his bleeding feet. He spent the bright, dangerous days hiding deeply in thick, thorny bushes or dark, wet, muddy ditches. He desperately needed to completely avoid encountering violent, roaming war bands or armed patrols from rival, angry chieftains. Every single snapping, loud branch sounded exactly like a terrifying, approaching hunting party. Every distant, echoing shout filled him with freezing, absolute terror and paralyzing dread. Upon finally reaching the bustling, chaotic, loud port, he saw a magnificent sight. He found a large, wooden ship actively, loudly preparing to sail away from the green island. It was exactly, perfectly, as his powerful, prophetic, nighttime dream had so clearly foretold on the lonely mountain. The rough, shouting, busy crew were hardened, dangerous, completely pagan sailors. They were likely trading highly prized, massive, fierce Irish wolfhounds to the distant continent or back to Roman Britain. Initially, the ship's angry, imposing captain aggressively and very loudly refused to let the dirty, starving, runaway slave board. Patrick felt a sudden, crushing, heavy wave of total, complete despair wash over his tired soul. He turned quietly, sadly away from the busy, loud docks to pray to his guiding God. But before he could even finish his desperate, whispered plea, something truly incredible happened. The loud, rough sailors unexpectedly and loudly called him back to the wooden dock. He bravely, stubbornly refused to swear a pagan binding oath of loyalty to the rough, dangerous crew. Yet, completely miraculously, they actually allowed the strange, quiet boy to sail with them anyway. The subsequent, terrifying, violent sea voyage lasted for 3 long, agonizing, sickening days. The small wooden ship was violently tossed by the heavy, gray, crushing ocean waves. They finally, thankfully, landed in a desolate, completely abandoned, sandy region. Historians strongly believe they landed on the wild, empty, totally barren coast of ancient Gaul, which is modern-day France. Following the chaotic, crashing landing, he and the hungry, angry crew wandered a barren, terrifying desert landscape. They walked completely lost for 28 long, agonizing, starving days. They were surviving near total, absolute starvation before finally, luckily finding human civilization and warm food. The agonizing, fiery, burning sting of blistered, severely bleeding feet was totally unbearable. It was the heavy price of weeks of walking through dense, thorny, sharp underbrush. The chaotic, totally overwhelming, thick smell of heavy salt, thick tar, and unwashed bodies at the bustling, muddy port was deeply shocking. It was a massive assault on his senses after the pure, silent, clean air of the mountains. The loud, incredibly intimidating, vicious barking of massive, fierce hunting hounds echoed in his ringing ears. The beasts were chained tightly on the heavy wooden deck of the rolling ship. The sudden, sickening, wonderful lurch of the heavy wooden deck was a feeling of pure terror and immense, beautiful joy. The ship finally broke free of the sandy, gripping shoreline and violently hit the dark, rolling open sea. The profound, completely breathless, heavy relief washed entirely over his tired, broken body. the wild, green, misty shores of his long, terrible captivity slowly, quietly faded into the hazy, gray, distant horizon. He was finally, truly free from his cruel, demanding master. He was finally, entirely free from the freezing, howling winds of Mount Slemish, escaping the beautiful, terrifying, magical island of his long enslavement. Patrick finally returned to the wider known world. He was finally heading back to the places he had lost so long ago. But he was no longer the pampered, arrogant, wealthy boy who was violently taken away in heavy iron chains. He was a hardened, deeply spiritual, incredibly powerful man with a completely new, burning purpose in his brave heart. Patrick's immense resilience in the harsh, intensely isolating wilderness is truly, deeply, profoundly inspiring. Have you ever found unexpected, powerful strength or profound, sudden clarity during a difficult, truly lonely time in your own life? Please share your personal thoughts and gentle stories with me in the quiet comments if you like. Settle in deeply, close your tired eyes, and let go of your daily, heavy worries. We will quietly, peacefully continue his incredible, sweeping journey back to the world he once knew. Patrick had survived the impossible. He crossed the vast and unforgiving ocean. He finally set foot back on the familiar shores of fading Roman Britain. The journey back to his childhood home was a deeply surreal experience. The muddy roads seemed much smaller than he remembered. The sprawling stone villas looked tired and incredibly worn, but the deep love of his desperate family remained completely unchanged. They had mourned his violent loss for over 6 long years. They truly believed his young bones were buried forever in a foreign land. You can easily imagine the warm and comforting embrace of his weeping parents. They held him tightly in a dimly lit and deeply familiar Roman room. It was a beautiful moment of profound and absolute disbelief. Their lost boy had miraculously returned to them from the dark edges of the earth. They begged him fiercely to stay with them forever. They pleaded with him to never leave the safety of Britain again. But his quiet soul was no longer at rest in the comfortable Roman world. He found the soft, imported linen tunics strangely uncomfortable against his hardened skin. He found the polite chatter of the wealthy patrician class completely empty and hollow. His mind constantly drifted back to the dark and silent mountains of his captivity. He felt a deep and unexplainable pull drawing him back to the misty island. Then came the profound and shattering vision in the dead of the night. Patrick recorded a powerful and terrifying dream that forever changed human history. A mysterious man named Victoricus suddenly appeared to him in the darkroom. This strange figure carried countless heavy letters from across the treacherous sea. He handed one of these ancient letters to the restless young man. The heavy parchment texture of the ancient letter unfolded in the vivid and moonlit dream. It bore a simple and haunting title. It was called The Voice of the Irish. As he slowly read the words, a terrifying thing happened to him. He clearly heard the desperate voices of the very people he had left behind. The haunting and echoing sound of phantom voices whispered urgently in the quiet hours. The voices came from the dark wood of Falkland near the distant western sea. They cried out to him with desperate and breaking hearts. They begged the holy youth to come and walk among them once more. This profound vision was deeply traumatic, yet entirely undeniable to his waking mind. He woke up violently trembling in the cold and silent dark. he realized with absolute clarity that his true destiny was not in Britain. He felt magically and divinely compelled to return willingly to the land of his cruel captors. But he knew he was not yet ready for this immense and dangerous task. He needed deep theological wisdom and powerful authority to face the ancient druids. And so, he made the incredibly difficult choice to leave his weeping family once again. He traveled far across the winding waters to the peaceful lands of Gaul, which is modern-day France. He spent many long and quiet years studying complex theology in absolute, unwavering dedication. You could hear the profound and heavy silence of a cold stone monastery cloister. The rough scratch of a sharp quill on smooth vellum echoed softly down the halls. He diligently studied sacred texts by the flickering and weak light of a single candle. He was carefully trained under the strict guidance of prominent and powerful church figures. He was heavily influenced by the deep and brilliant teachings of Saint Germain of Auxerre. But his long path to becoming a respected leader was not simple or easy. He faced significant and bitter opposition from his British ecclesiastical superiors. These arrogant men thought the former slave was far too uneducated for such a massive mission. They actively tried to block his chosen path to the high priesthood. But Patrick possessed an unyielding and quiet resilience forged on a freezing mountain. He patiently endured their harsh criticisms and cruel, mocking doubts. He knew his divine calling was infinitely stronger than their petty rules and politics. Despite the constant doubts of his peers, his deep and burning faith prevailed. He was eventually and joyfully ordained as a powerful, respected bishop. He was given a specific and unprecedented mandate to bring light to Ireland. Armed with his new authority and a profound sense of purpose, he prepared his ship. Patrick set sail once more, returning willingly to the misty shores of his nightmares. The year was roughly 432. Bishop Patrick arrived back in the wild and untamed lands of ancient Ireland. He navigated his small wooden ship safely through the treacherous and hidden coastal waters. The soft and rhythmic lapping of the tide beat gently against the heavy wooden hull. His ship gently grounded on the wet and sandy Irish beach at dawn. He had landed safely at a beautiful place known as Strangford Loch. This dark territory belonged to a powerful and fierce local chieftain named Dichu. The sudden arrival of a strange Roman ship immediately alerted the watchful local warriors. Dichu initially intended to kill the bold intruders without asking any questions. He drew his heavy iron sword and marched aggressively down to the rocky shore. But as he approached the quiet stranger, something completely miraculous and beautiful happened. Dichu was purportedly so deeply moved by Patrick's entirely peaceful demeanor that he dropped his weapon. The fierce warlord looked into the calm eyes of the bishop and instantly converted to the new faith. This profound moment was the very first step in a massive and peaceful revolution. Dichu was a generous man and happily gifted Patrick a simple wooden building. It was a humble, rustic barn that quickly became his very first church on the island. The earthy and damp smell of old hay and ancient timber filled the cool air. This simple barn became a safe sanctuary and was widely known as Saul. The name comes from the old Irish word sabhall, which simply means barn. But the long road ahead was incredibly dangerous and fiercely complicated for the bishop. Ireland had absolutely no centralized stone cities or familiar paved Roman infrastructure. It was ruled fiercely by over 150 distinct and constantly warring tribes. These powerful tribes were known as the Tuatha in the ancient Celtic language. Every single tribe had its own fierce king and strict, bloody territorial borders. Patrick had to operate completely outside the safe and massive protection of the Grand Roman Empire. This was a wildly unprecedented and highly dangerous missionary strategy in the ancient world. Most men would have perished quickly and violently in such a fragmented land. But Patrick possessed a secret and truly powerful weapon in his arsenal. He utilized his deep and painful knowledge of Irish customs and the complex language. He intimately understood the strict Brehon laws from his long, dark years of miserable slavery. He used this deep knowledge to navigate the tribal politics safely and smoothly. He strategically and deliberately targeted the powerful kings and wealthy chieftains first. He wisely knew that if the strong leaders accepted him, the loyal tribe would quickly follow. He routinely distributed beautiful and incredibly generous gifts to the proud kings. You could see the bright glint of firelight on the intricate gold torques worn by the wary Celtic chieftains. He gladly paid heavy silver for the vital protection of their fierce, armed warrior escorts. He engaged in endless and patient diplomacy around the warm and smoky hearth fires. You could hear the low and respectful murmur of quiet, long negotiations. They were spoken softly in the flowing and melodic tones of Old Irish. The vast and green rolling hills stretched out far under a soft and overcast sky. They held endless and beautiful possibilities for the patient and wise bishop. His completely radical approach was remarkably and beautifully peaceful. There are absolutely no historical records of Patrick ever employing brutal violence to spread his gentle message. He did not bring marching armies or gleaming Roman swords to the emerald shores. He brought only quiet, healing prayers and a deep understanding of the Celtic soul. Having firmly secured a safe and strong foothold in the north, his ambition grew. Patrick slowly turned his brave sights toward the powerful spiritual heart of the island. This bold decision would quickly lead to a legendary and magical clash of ancient faiths. The absolute climax of his early and highly dangerous mission occurred during the vibrant season of spring. The Christian festival of Easter completely coincided with a major ancient pagan fire festival. This was likely the ancient and powerful celebration known as Beltane. It was a sacred time when the dark winter was banished by the warm return of the sun. The High King Laughaire of Tara held absolute and terrifying authority over these deep traditions. He had issued a strict and unyielding royal decree across the wide green lands. He commanded that absolutely no fire could be lit anywhere in the vast kingdom. The very first flame had to be the massive ceremonial fire lit at the Hill of Tara. To break this royal decree was an act of open and totally suicidal rebellion. But Patrick was completely fearless and deeply devoted to his own rising light. In direct and highly dangerous defiance of the powerful pagan king, he made his move. Patrick slowly climbed the steep and grassy slopes of the Hill of Slain. He gathered dry wood and built a massive and defiant paschal fire in the dark. He struck the flint and brought a brilliant holy flame into the freezing night. The massive and roaring pillar of bright orange flames cut sharply through the deep darkness. It burned furiously against the velvety blackness of the night sky on the quiet hill. This bright and holy fire was highly and clearly visible from the distant hill of Terra. It completely infuriated the proud High King and his shocked, angry royal court. The furious king immediately rode out with his fierce and heavily armored warband. He brought his chief druids, men named Locru and Lucette Male, to deal with the threat. They intended to brutally execute the bold violator who dared to mock their ancient, sacred laws. You could hear the thunderous and rhythmic thud of dozens of massive, armored horses. They were galloping fiercely and violently across the dark and misty, rolling valley. They arrived at the blazing fire with sharp swords drawn and dark magic on their lips. The heavy and intimidating silence of the king's hardened warriors was truly terrifying. They completely surrounded the lone and unarmed bishop on the grassy, windy hilltop. The swirling and hypnotic bright sparks rose high into the cool and quiet night air. They drifted up slowly from the massive and defiant bonfire into the vast, starry sky. What followed was described in ancient legend as a highly dramatic and magical trial of power. It was a fierce, invisible clash between Patrick's quiet prayers and the druids' dark, ancient magic. The druids chanted ancient curses and tried desperately to extinguish the holy light. But the soft and unyielding calmness in Patrick's eyes never wavered for a single moment. He faced the absolute fury of the High King and the dark spells with pure, shining grace. Despite the intense and terrifying confrontation, absolutely no blood was shed on the green grass. Patrick's fearless composure and unshakable, profound belief deeply impressed the violent warrior king. King Loghair saw a powerful and quiet magic that completely rivaled his own fierce druids. While the proud King Loghair never fully converted to the new religion he yielded, he granted Patrick the vital and precious permission to preach freely across his vast, beautiful lands. This single and powerful event, it proved definitively that the new, gentle faith could stand boldly up to the old powers. The quiet victory at Terra, functionally and magically, opened the entirety of the Irish landscape. It allowed Patrick's peaceful, endless wandering to reach every dark, hidden corner of the island. With the king's reluctant blessing, the brave bishop continued his long and beautiful journey. Patrick spent the rest of his long and remarkable life walking the length and breadth of the island. He slowly and patiently cemented a legacy that would echo through all of human history. Over the passing decades, Patrick personally and gently baptized thousands of willing, eager people. He stood in the cold rivers and bright, shimmering lakes across the beautiful island. You could hear the gentle and cooling splash of fresh, clean, holy water. It fell softly from a natural spring being poured carefully over a bowed, quiet head. He ordained hundreds of dedicated, humble priests to carry on his peaceful, quiet work. He founded numerous small churches in the deep, green valleys and high, misty mountains. His most notable and lasting foundation was the primary and beautiful stone church at Armagh. Because Ireland lacked massive Roman cities, his work took on a completely unique shape. Patrick inadvertently helped lay the strong foundation for the rural Irish monastic system. These small and quiet monasteries became brilliant beacons of light and learning in the Dark Ages. He was not just a builder of churches, but a fierce and brave defender of the innocent. He is widely credited with writing the very first known anti-slavery document in human history. It was a passionate and angry letter known as the Letter to the Soldiers of Caraccas. He bravely excommunicated a powerful British warlord for violently taking innocent Irish slaves. The boy who was once chained in the dark now fiercely protected others from the same terrible fate. He spent his final and quiet years living incredibly simply among the grateful people he loved. He completely and totally refused any personal wealth or golden gifts from the rich kings. He continued his grueling and endless travels, even when his body grew tired, old, and frail. You could feel the rough and comforting texture of his simple wooden staff. It had been worn completely smooth by many decades of endless and faithful walking. But even the strongest and most resilient bodies must eventually rest in the quiet earth. Tradition holds that the beloved bishop died entirely peacefully around the year 461. He passed away quietly on the 17th day of March, a date now known across the world. The peaceful and golden light of a warm setting sun cast long and beautiful shadows. The golden light fell softly over a humble stone church where he drew his final quiet breath. He was reportedly and lovingly buried at a beautiful green site known as Downpatrick. This quiet place quickly and inevitably became a location of massive and enduring global reverence. His entirely peaceful and deeply respectful mission is historically and completely unique. Ireland was wonderfully Christianized without yielding a single and tragic martyr to brutal violence. He successfully and brilliantly blended the gentle new faith with the existing and proud Celtic culture. He did not try to violently erase the old ways, but rather gave them a new and shining purpose. The frightened and enslaved Roman boy had miraculously transformed his own tragic, painful destiny. He had become the deeply beloved and eternal father of an entire, proud, beautiful nation. He completed an unprecedented and magical historical arc that defies simple, logical explanation. You can almost feel the quiet and profound stillness of a gentle, rolling breeze. It blows softly over a simple and unmarked grave in the rich, dark earth. The incredible journey of Patricius, the enslaved Roman boy who became the soul of a nation, comes to a gentle, quiet rest in the earth of the land he once feared. His story is a profound testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Thank you for walking alongside him with me tonight. Let your mind relax as the dust settles on his footsteps. And as we gently turn the page to explore the beautiful myths and legends that blossomed from his remarkable life, I invite you to simply close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift further into the soothing currents of history.